Hey, before we start this podcast, I want to let you know that Khaki is sponsoring this video. Now, if you don't know what Khaki is a fantastic website where you can buy Thomas products that won't get you price gouged out of your mind. It's really good. I like it a lot. They have some really cheap items. And when I say cheap, I don't mean like, oh, it's poor quality. I mean like price-wise, French kiss. It is so good. They got everything from Play Rail to Erdl, Take Along, Wooden Railway. Now the cheap prices are great, but if you want to save even more money, you can use code PDP10 to save an extra 10% off your first order. And the money that you save using the code goes to supporting me as a creator, so thank you very much if you do that. Even if you don't want to use the code though, it is a fantastic website and I definitely recommend. Anyways, that's all I gotta say. Thank you Khaki for sponsoring the show. Link in the description. Now, on to the main event. Hello and welcome to the Analyzation Express, the show where I read and review a variety of Thomas content that I wouldn't be able to tackle in my normal videos. Today we're going to be taking a look at the island Swansong, written by the Dark Knight on Wattpad, who seems to go by Trained Assassin on the title cover. And just looking at this right now, I'm sensing a very bittersweet story going into this here. Like we've got, in the tags, we've got mystery, exploration, post-apocalypse. Oh, what have I got myself into? This is not your average brand of Thomas story. You know it's going to be a dark, dreary story when it says the magic is gone, their universe has been forgotten right in the foreword. The adventures of the engines on the island of Sodor have captivated a generation of children. But as their market success strayed further from the truth, and with a world around the island changing, the final adventures of the engines of Sodor were lost to history. In a different world, where society has moved on from the steam and diesel engines of old, one urban explorer makes a pilgrimage to find the lost, deserted island, hoping to uncover what happened to the famous engines. Piecing together what happened in the final days of the Fat Controller's Railway, it's time to learn what really happened to Thomas and his friends. Oh geez, we're in for a heartbreaking story, aren't we? And this, Well, let's get things started off with Chapter 1, Sodor Soil. Ever since I was a child, I'd heard stories about a magical land, an island where dreams come true. Dreams are fleeting. You have them once, they rarely stick with you. Those that do are still ideas trapped in a singular moment of time, unlikely to become reality by the time the means are acquired. But this island is different. Its non-human inhabitants captivate millions through books and later television. These inhabitants are trains. Talking trains. Engineered, but they live and breathe as we do. Alive they may be, but like all living things, time has its way with them. Time doesn't stand still as much as we'd like it to. The book series stopped, the television show changed, relying on make-believe over real-life accounts from the books. The animation became far removed from the real places and events. In the end, the tales and inhabitants of the island of Sodor were commodified, that's a word I've never seen written before, and corrupted by their own corporate success. This is like a little meta and is already like, ooh, I feel like we're in for a treat today. The real world Sodor was left behind. No one knows what became of it. As a child, it was my mental escape, and the dream was always that one day I would get there for real. The map exists. The railway's history was meticulously archived up to a point, in parentheses, but I feared I missed my chance. The world has changed, almost unrecognizably so. Mediterranean summers are now the UK's norm. The coasts are flooded, the east coast eaten away by the frigid cold waters of the North Sea. London has contracted, now home to only the richest of elite. HS2 has been and gone to little fanfare. If anyone knows what HS2 means, let me know in the comments, because I have no idea, and clearly I can't be bothered to Google it. HS2 has been gone to little fanfare, mainly used by people trying to get out of London to the Midlands. Bristol, Cardiff, Liverpool, and many other cities have been all but abandoned. Transport is now completely electric. Too little, too late. Society survives, albeit on the phrase of fragility. No one knows what became of Sodor. All that's known is that the people have emigrated, and everything, the railway included, is presumed abandoned. Some engines escape to the mainland, their curse of survival being the surrender of their sentience. No one travels to or from the island anymore. Stories about engines have long ceased. Do any of them still exist on the island? Too many pressing questions come to me in the dark hours of the morning, replacing my dreams of countryside and the chuffing of colorful locomotives I once had in my formative years. My inner child needs the answers, while I hope the maturity and resilience of my adult form will be enough for the thorny, harsh truths I fear I'll find. Okay, already right off the bat, this is very well written, really liking this a lot, and we're only on chapter 1. The adventure began in Barrow in Furness, Sodor's sole link to what the Sudrians call the Other Railway. Here, there once stood a gleaming rolling bridge, bright red in the animated show, that served the railway and the shipping channel that ran beneath it. I stood, gazing over the bridge's decrepit form, a poor indicator of what was to come. The mainland track leading to it was still in place, though the rails had been removed from the sections directly in front of the bridge, as if to prevent anything from going on or off the island. The mellow yellow fields of Barrow stretched out on either side of me. I think Barrow's supposed to be capitalized, but considering how good this is so far, that's a pretty small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. Rotting fence posts leant at all angles along the edge of what had been the railway line. Is lent the right word there? I'm not sure. I think bent would probably be the word there. I don't know. That could just be a writing quirk. The bridge itself, named after the nearby settlement of Vickerstown, remained down and flush with the Barrow soils. Flakes of red paint remained tucked into the corners, too hidden for sunlight and other elements to be fragmented or dislodged. The remainder of the bridge had rusted into a deep crimson red, more akin to the shades associated with scrapyards, succumbing to decades out in the wind, rain, and sun. All sections seemed to still be in place, though how stable the structure was remained unclear. The looming scaffold upper section, which raised the bridge, had swayed off-center, jamming all other mechanistic elements. Mechanistic is a weird word. The two huge counterweights had relented to the alluring pull of gravity, breaking away to embed themselves in the ballast of the rails below, blocking the line. Again, it was unclear if this barrier was accidental or intentional. Regardless, given the shift towards container shipping and supertankers that needed large, deepened ports, the bridge was a relic of times when ships were smaller, nimbler, and more numerous. Ballast scraped, lifting with each footstep I took, the first time it had moved in who knows how long. I walked towards the bridge, 80-liter backpack on my shoulders, the weight shifting as I traversed the uneven rocky road. I had no clue what was waiting for me on the island. Basic provisions were necessary. My first step onto the bridge loosened flakes of rust. They scratched under my soul with a noise that itched my nerves like a rash. The bridge still felt solid, so I pressed on. Weeds, blown from the sea breeze, had sprouted in nooks and crannies I wouldn't otherwise have noticed. Gull guano littered every surface. Nature had certainly found a home on the island. Edging around the counterweights, my feet planted onto Sodor soil for the first time. A dream fulfilled, my curiosity fully awakened, and my senses heightened in ways new to me. An industrial, burnt aroma lingered all these decades later. Maybe it was real, or my mind was filling in the blanks with what I expected or hoped to find. I pulled out my map, figuring I was on the far east point of the main line. Following the tracks would lead me to the biggest station on the island, Vickerstown. It was about 3 kilometers by rail, easily walkable. I mean, maybe easily walkable by you. I would not want to walk 3 kilometers. I'd be like, buggy, let's go. I'd be in a car instantaneously. I'd be calling a taxi. I aimed to hunker down there for the night, to scrounge around and get a feel for the state of the island. If anyone remained, it would be there, and they could fill me in on what exactly happened here after the planet succumbed to climate change. Geez, this is taking place in a really desolate future. I walked on, mulling over what was likely the case, phasing out of the household coal market and the UK impact heritage railways. But Sodor's rail network relied on coal, and to a lesser extent, diesel. All coal alternatives, wood pellets and the like, wouldn't have been voluminous enough. This guy is writing with like a level that I don't think I've seen from anyone else in the Thomas Fandom. Even like the top level writers, I don't think have used words or like storytelling like this. And this is a genuinely really fun read so far, or efficient enough to uphold a network of this size. Even if Sodor went to the UK government appealing for rights to be their own sovereign nation or region, there were no guarantees their case would be successful. But would people rather abandon their island, frozen in time for so long, or modernize it, removing all the endearing, quaint qualities that people on the mainland loved and were jealous of? Something else had to be at work. The fields on either side of the line gave way to retaining walls. Lichen and ivy snaked across the red bricks. Soon, the elevation of the surrounding countryside dipped as the tract became a viaduct. That doesn't sound quite right. Up ahead loomed the big station, tall and grandiose in the environment. Grandiose? Is that a word? I guess it means big, even after all these years. The height of the station entrance's arches dazzled me as I walked up the lines into the station itself. The central pillars were a scale of stone and mortar architecture, rarely seen anymore, except perhaps at St. Pancras or Temple Meads. Windows were shattered or covered in so much grime that they were opaque. Most of the green scaffolding supporting the roof remained in place, though a couple of sections had loosened, hanging in precarious positions high above me. There were no trains or humans in sight. Normally I'd make a joke about him breaking and entering, but if this place really is abandoned, I think at that point it's pretty much fair game. I mean, there's no cops to stop you, so. I clambered up onto the platforms, a place I'd always put myself in my dreams. The trains would come and go, stop and talk, fuss about with the passengers and each other, but the place was deserted, except for the cold wind that seemed to creep into my sleeves and neck. There was so much we never saw in book illustrations beyond the edges of the page. Ropes and rope stands still anticipated queues of passengers. I walked up to the ticket counter. All positions were locked shut, layered in dust. A small board sat on the center of the counter. The NWR is ceasing operations with immediate effect. No explanation or elaboration, only the most cryptic evidence something had gone awry. I walked down the steps of the station entrance. A miniature yet grand archway with small, human-sized glass doors. Toward what was the taxi bay, the cobbled road had withstood the test of time. There were no vehicles to commandeer. He literally was gonna just steal a car, okay. Finding a working car would really speed up my exploration. Alas, it was unlikely. And I mean, I couldn't have just driven here myself with my own car. Do I have a car? Remains to be seen. A steady slope of cobbled road led down to a crossroads junction, where a set of tram lines headed off to my left and right. I noticed these in the show, though we never saw anything run on them. A section further down the line was flooded, while the other direction had snapped electrical lines. The lines headed to the east would yield no insight. All that laid that way was the coast. I decided to track the lines as they headed west, curving around the north as they slipped under the viaducts. I saw flashes of Henry crashing and hanging over the road in this very spot. Oh, from Journey Beyond Sodor, I get it. A vivid, real version, but exaggeratedly animated, so therefore questionable in its historical accuracy. However, the structure, the city layout, and the architecture all match the animated set. Maybe there was more truth to those later absurdities than I gave credit. The tram lines curved back west, rising up into the countryside to track level, joining the main line at the junction. From there, a single railway line split off at a set of points, curving north. I had a sneaky suspicion, not a sneaking suspicion, a sneaky one. I had a sneaky suspicion of where they went, very sneaky. The sky overhead was drawing one of the famous Sodor sunsets. Drabbles of blue, orange, and pink bled together in the pearl-white clouds that slipped through the heavens. If the buildings I was hoping to find on this line remained, it would offer the perfect place to spend the night. It still stood, after all these years later, the red roundhouse, 5 berths, with tracks stemming from the central turntable. To the left was a pond where I was certain a big blue engine had once slipped off the rails. The waters had risen, spilling out to fill the turntable well. The turntable bridge was rusted and partially collapsing on one side. Bulrushes had sprouted all around the rim. All surrounding sides were desolate. I approached the roundhouse. Wooden doors had rotted at the hinges and collapsed in most of the berths, except for the one at the far end. Slate roof tiles, smashed and broken, littered the ballast. Suddenly, the prospects of darkness inside massaged anxieties and worries on my mind. I cursed myself for not bringing along any weapons for defensive purposes, as opposed to offensive, terroristic purposes. The naivety of my inner child still hoped for Sodor to be this magical place, almost devoid of crime and squalid illness of mankind, so prevalent and obvious in the rest of the world. Now, though, given the decomposing state of things, I wasn't sure what lurked behind even the most familiar of childhood fantasies. Bending down, I grabbed a shard of slate, broken to a sharp point by its fall at some point in the past. I crept closer to the dark interior of the roundhouse, reaching the doorway of the central berth. Falling into alignment with the wall, I took a moment to control my breathing, closing my eyes. Holding in that current breath, I swung into the open, head racing to survey the interior. Emptiness, relief, disappointment, ambivalence of all three feelings. Nothing seemed amiss, except for the lack of anything recognizable beyond the standing structure. "Hello?" A voice called amongst the brickwork. Female, louder than a normal human, even without the assistance of echo. Frozen, my ears raced to trace the source. It had been uttered, spoken more like a question than a greeting. I spun around, the locked berth, shrouded deep in the shadows of the roundhouse. The vague outline of an engine appeared before my readjusted eyes. For the first time, my eyes were resting on a Sodor engine. Alive. Talking. Real. Perhaps there was something left after all. Oh, baby, what a way to start the first chapter. Oh my gosh, that was good. Whew, this is something else altogether. This is not someone writing a Thomas story. This is someone writing a story about Thomas characters. Chapter 2, First Contact. Scrambling for my torch, I raced to shine a light, to gaze upon a real face, upon a real train. Pushing the switch, I angled the torch's beam. Angular side tanks, 3 pairs of driving wheels with an external, rectangular piston emerged as the concentration of photons peeled back the darkness. Dust and rust, that rhymes, dust and rust clung over most of the molted paintwork. In a handful of areas, tinges of red and pink showed through. A dented golden lamp sat atop her funnel. I walked around, getting a better view of the front. There was no smokebox door. In its place was the largest, roundest face I'd ever seen. Blotchy in places with soot, but I could make out freckles. The eyes, my goodness, they were big, like the size of basketballs. They stared at me with the power and weight of a deity. I felt minute and fragile by comparison. So much was held within her gaze. Pain, suffering, loneliness. I drew the torch beam away so I could avoid scaring her. "Rosie." "Are you a vandal?" she asked, a flicker of fear in her voice. "Or a thief? Are you here to steal parts?" No, I held my hands up. "I'm an urban explorer." "Explorer? What is there to explore?" A confused expression reshaped her face. Her voice was loud. The reason why was unclear to me. Maybe because of her size, or the smokebox helped amplify it. Smokebox helping to amplify it? Wording. So many questions. "I like exploring old and abandoned places," I explained, "to see if anything is left behind, or if there's anything that can explain why they're abandoned." "Oh," Rosie blinked. "What have you found so far?" "Nothing." I put my hands down. No people, no engines. It's like the island was deserted en masse. "I have no idea how long I've been here," Rosie began. "My driver and fireman put me in here and said when the railway reopened, I'd be brought out to shunt the trains." Her voice paused, cracking under its own mental recollections and wishes. "But they never came back." "The railway never reopened." I gazed around the shed. Ivy crept in through broken skylights. Night was crawling from outside. This was to be my accommodation. I began unpacking, unclipping the sleeping bag from my backpack. "What are you doing?" "I'm camping here tonight." I revealed some baked beans and a mini stove within the backpack. Holy crap, this is a big backpack, jeez. We'll have plenty of time to talk. "It's been so long since I've had company." Rosie closed her eyes, remembering to the days when she huffed about the yard, shunting trucks and sorting freight. I got the beans on to cook, and wolfed them down a few minutes later. Propping my torch against my bag to spread some light through the cavernous shed, I got comfortable in my sleeping bag. "You worked at Vicarstown, right?" "Yes, I was station pilot." "Do you know what happened to the other engines?" I drew a pen and a small notebook out of my trouser pocket. "Not many," Rosie furrowed her brow. "I know Sir Topham sold off what he could. I think most went back to their respective lines and sheds here on the island. Wellsworth, Tidmouth, Farquhar." "Right," I made a note. "Do you know what happened to any of them?" Rosie cast me an eager stare. "I've tracked down a few." I turned to a previous page. I made a list before coming here. Stepney is back at the Bluebell. Winston is back at the Steam Museum in Swindon. A number of diesel shunters, are spread around the mainland, all repainted. They were hard to trace, but I think Diesel, Airy, and Bert are still straining their buffers. Paxton and Sydney were lucky enough to be picked up by heritage lines. The Langlian and East Lancashire. "Thank goodness," she sighed. "Seems like they've all gotten their just desserts." Yes. Stafford, Whiff, and Emily are now at the National Railway Museum. Stephen is currently on tour. Fergus is in preservation. I'm glad Fergus is in preservation because I was pretty sure he was just absorbed by the Shadow Realm after Season 7. It's so wonderful they managed to get away, Rosie beamed. It would have been wonderful to talk to any of them again about their new lives. My smile vanished from my face. She instantly noticed. What's wrong? They survived, but can no longer talk. The words clawed out from my throat. A harsh truth. Maybe a meaningful lie would have been better. The island curse is real. If you leave, your face, your sentience, disappears. The television show omitted that fact to keep going, as did some of the later books. It was reduced to a mere rumor. Oh, Rosie's lip began to tremble. So salvation was never real. I had no words. I felt like I'd broken the poor engine's smoke box, coming in with a glimmer of light, only to shatter any hope or reprieve I'd inspired. Perhaps it was best to leave Sodor as a memory. I could easily be home by tomorrow, but I'd already come this far. This first contact would stay with me forever. I may as well see the mission through. Don't worry about upsetting me, Rosie interrupted the silence. I'd rather the honest truth than more lies to chew over for however long I've been left in this shed. Again, I hesitated into silence for longer than I felt comfortable. The task of accepting fate, mortality, it wasn't something I could advise on or even understand myself. The thought alone of being in that position frightened me. Tell me a little about you. Rosie changed the subject. Why did you come to Sodor? Most of the other people have forgotten about it. Well, I put my notepad to the side. I grew up reading about Sodor. It was in my books, on TV, toys of the engines lined the shopping aisles. The world seems so immersive, wonderful. It's followed me through life into adulthood. It's inspired me to write stories, helped me make friends in faraway places. So I just had to come and see it for myself. So you're a writer? Rosie asked. By night, I have a day job to pay the bills. I like exploring, particularly deserted places. They make for great inspiration. Are you going to write about what you find here? Maybe. I paused, thinking about it seriously. I was here to serve my own personal curiosities first and foremost. It may not be a happy story or a happy ending. I don't know if people would want to read it. You won't know until you put it out there, Rosie answered. The drowsiness began to hit me. I'll sleep on that. I'd walked a long way, carrying heavy loads. The fact I hadn't complained cracked a childish smirk across my face. I'd persevered, like a really useful engine. What's so funny? Rosie looked puzzled. Nothing, I shook my head. Somehow I was still awake, even though the moon and stars glittered through the gaps in the roof. I'll let you get some rest, Rosie said. It's been nice having some company. We can talk a bit more in the morning, I said, cocooning myself in my sleeping bag. Good night. A wave of tiredness continued to creep over me as I lay down, rolling over with eyes forced shut. The wonders of Sodor would resume in the morning. I awoke as soon as the sun was up, Rosie still sleeping, huge eyes shut, so I went about sorting breakfast. She awoke shortly after I'd finished eating. How did you sleep? As best as one can on sleeping bags and sleepers. They didn't really live up to my name. I rubbed my back. It's a good pun, I like that. What do you plan to do today? She looked down as I unfolded my giant map of Sodor, a photocopy from a freebie from the back of a special edition book long out of print before the book series even came to an end. I think I'll start by heading down the Normanby line to the fishing village, I explained. If anyone's still here and nearby, they'll be living there. Failing that, I'll cut across the main line and follow that west. What will you do after that? I'll make my way towards Knapford, perhaps via Brendam. The docks may hold some clues, particularly if there was a big rush off the island after whatever happened to the railways. But Knapford is the endgame. If Sir Topham Hatt was selling off engines, there will be lists, receipts, and other information in his office. I can use that to piece together what happened, though I'd really like to find more engines and people along the way. That sounds like a lot of traveling, on foot as well, Rosie blinked. If I find a working car, that'll make things a lot easier, but it's unlikely. Well, I wish you the best of luck. Rosie's voice leaked disappointment. I hope you find what you're looking for. Part of me didn't want to leave her. All alone in the shed, it was a wonder she had any grasp of sanity left. But then again, who knew what happened to engines left like this, except the inevitable? I gathered my belongings, the pack feeling marginally lighter than yesterday. I departed, leaving Rosie to her internal peace. If time, rations, and the trip permitted, I could stop on my way back to the mainland. But for the moment, my focus remained forward. I found my way back to the junction. The map indicated roads heading southwest to Ballyhoo, but I wanted to follow the main line to gauge the condition of the tracks themselves. Ballast crumpled underfoot like an oversized gravel path, punctuated by silence when my steps occasionally fell on the wood sleepers. A handful snapped under my weight, rotting after years of neglect, but most held firm, not yet reaching that point of decay. Shrubbery and weeds cropped up at random. There had been no treatment to the line for some time. Some plants, particularly horsetails, reached up to waist height. I soon approached the Wye Junction, W-Y-E Junction, colonized by greenery. The remains of a billboard stood to one side. The cab and wheels of what had been a picture of a diesel, all that remained of what had been advertised. Vickerstown Diesel Works was nearby. An idea sparked in my mind. If there was any fuel on Sodor that might power a car, it would be there. Mid-morning was closing in, but there was time to take a detour. I could stop over in Norrumby for the night. 2 tracks led up to the diesel work gates. The depot differed heavily from what was featured in the animated show. The architecture and track layouts were much more in line with what I'd come to expect from the book's illustrations of Sodor. Instead, there were parallel tracks joined in places by points, all of which sat in a bed of ballast. The sheds at the end of the lines were shuttered, but the buildings were constructed of red brick with slate roofs. A siding peeled off to the right, leading to what would be the refueling station. A tinge of diesel oil still lingered in the air. Perhaps an engine or two remained as well. Drawn in by the possibility, I approached the shed less stealthily than I had the roundhouse. Most of the shutters were rolled down, bolted to the floors by padlocks. One berth on the far right remained half open. Slipping my pack off, I bent under it, climbing inside almost darkness itself. I switched on my torch, conscious about the batteries in it now, and gave a quick sweep of the interior. There was an engine at the far end, but not one that I recognized. It had certainly never been on a page nor the screen to my knowledge. The chill of the unknown wrapped its bony fingers around my spine. And as much as I would like to carry on into Chapter 3, I think we're going to end things here, just so that I can get to my final thoughts, because honestly, this story is... I didn't realize how big this was when I started reading it. It is 31 parts long. That is very big, and there's no way that I'd be able to cover all of this in a timely manner. It's just too much story. It's a very good story, and I'll get to that in a second, but there's just too much here for me to cover in one video. Even if I broke this up into a bunch of videos, it would pretty much be like weeks and weeks and weeks of covering the story. And honestly, this is such a well-made story. I want to cover this in its own video. I think that I need to do something a little better than just a podcast where I read it, because there's not really a lot that I can criticize about this, and there's a lot that I want to praise about this. Like, honestly, I'm surprised that no one's been talking about the story. It finished in 2021 by the looks of things, March of 2021. Why is nobody talking about this story? Seriously, this is amazing. Like, I know it doesn't have like all the fancy photoshops that Sodor Fallout has. I know it doesn't have the series that, you know, something like Sodor Dark Realm does, or the Mist stuff, or the SCP, whatever. This is fantastic. It's so perfectly paced. It's so sad. I've only read 2 chapters, but I'm honestly super impressed with this one. This is a story that I want to read on my own time, because, oh my gosh, this was way beyond anything that I was expecting it to be. This was written by Dark Knight on Wattpad, who goes by Trained Assassin on the cover of the book. It's got over 96,000 reads, and I'm surprised nobody's talking about this in the community. Like, seriously, if you are watching this and you have been intrigued by anything that I've said so far, go and read this book. Link is in the description. Holy crap, this is absolutely phenomenal storytelling. It's perfect. I genuinely have not found anything that made me say, hold up, wait a second, this is bad. Everything just feels so right in it. In terms of characterization, I don't really think I can say a lot, because this is kind of supposed to be a dour sort of story, but you know, getting to see Rosie was pretty cool. It's really nice to see a character like her who, despite being so constant in the background literally all the time in the show, never really got any kind of story to herself. Any story that she did have, she shared with another character, and I think the one time that she did get a story in season 12 was just kind of bland. I mean, as season 12 is, but it was really nice to see her again. I thought that her character of being like stuck in this shed was really, really well done. It felt like she had not seen someone in a very long time, and I really like that. following this not quite POV setting, but kind of sort of POV setting where we're not reading like a diary or anything. We are having the story be told to us as if the person was sitting in the room with us. But at the same time, it feels like we're there on the journey. Like, it's hard to explain the kind of POV that we've got, but it's so good. I wish that more stories took this kind of format, because as much as I love the diary format where it's like writing things out, if you don't have visuals to go along with it, it can kind of be a little bit repetitive and boring after a while. This, on the other hand, is like a mystery that we're solving alongside the reader insert, you could say. Because it's not like you're saying like, oh, you see a thing and then you notice Rosie here. It's more like I saw a thing and we're kind of like alongside as like the cameraman of sorts. And we're imagining this in our head. Honestly, really like this one. Go check it out. Please, please check it out. This is highly rated by me. Go tell them how good of a story this is. I think I will get to this at some point in a much grander scale. That's going to be for a video down the road though. Until then, this has been the Analyzation Express, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.